Hi everyone, my name is Gabriel and this is the Hour of the Raven, your channel for everything Ravenloft, RPG, Dungeons and Dragons, and horror. Today we shall explore the history of Bloodspoor, uncovering the tragic fall of the Tani civilization and the invasion and devastation caused by Illithid horrors. Before we begin, some brief announcements and clarifications. First, I would like to once again recommend to you the new book by Jason Bowers from the PhD&D channel on DM's Guild called PhD&D Ravenloft Adventures. This book begins with an adventures that take place in the domain of Bloodspoor and has an interesting premise in which players discover themselves inserted into a simulation of reality manipulated by the experiments of a powerful mind flayer. Waking up from this simulation, however, will lead them to explore the horrors of the Illithid colony of Bloodspoor. You can check out the basic premise of this adventure on the PhD&D channel, whose video link about Bloodspoor I will leave below. Bloodspoor is a domain that first appeared in the first box of the setting, the Ravenloft Realm of Terror, and later had further developments in the Forbidden Lore box set, and one of the first adventures in the Ravenloft setting, called Dwarfs of Darkness. After these initial appearances, the domain was removed from the core in the event of the Grand Conjunction, but it did not have much development after this relocation. During the final period of 3rd edition, the Wizard of the Coast website published an excellent short story written by Ari Marmel about a patient in an asylum who had a mysterious connection to Bloodspoor. Bloodspoor was reintroduced for 5th edition in the Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and despite minor discrepancies at some descriptions, it remains largely similar to its previous characterization. For the first time in an official material, there was a short attempt to establish a history of the Illithid god Brain, the Dark Lord of the domain. Throughout all these years of gap until 5th edition reintroduced the domain, many fans created material to expand the domain. An idea I first saw on the Fraternity of Shadows forums and netbooks, and which was also explored by Mist Factor Press in the book Ravenloft Encyclopedia of Dark Lords and Domains, was that Bloodspoor was not an island of dread in the mists, but was moved to the moon that shines over the skies of the demiplane of dread. We also used this idea in our first Black Feather book, The Dread Space, in which we present space-themed domains of dread in a Spelljammer and Ravenloft crossover. Given the little material we have on the domain, and the absence of a gazetteer of the region, I decided that in the next Bloodspoor videos, I will also present as complementary information the material we wrote about Bloodspoor in our book Dread Space. So there is no confusion about what is official setting material and what is material created by the Black Feather. I will leave the Black Feather logo whenever the material presented is taken directly from the Dread Space, to make it easier for those of you who are watching this video to separate our creation from the material created by the official Ravenloft authors. To tell the history of Bloodspoor, we will use a significant part of what we wrote for the Dread Space, in which we created a gothic backstory for the Illithid god Brain and the tragedy of the Tani civilization. If you like our ideas for the Dread Space, I will also leave the link below for our book, which presents 10 domains of dread, with a space horror theme, and presents a cluster of domains known as Dread Space. Are you ready? Used as experiments by the insane Dr. Cloud Heimfroth, we undergo a process of behavior conditioning through pain, and are sent through a portal to the wastelands of Bloodspoor as emissaries to encounter a monstrous alien entity. Transported from cell 319 to Bloodspoor, we wander aimlessly through this rocky wasteland in a red twilight until we are under a terrible lightning storm and need to take shelter underground. In the caves, we are surrounded by a group of deformed and bestial-looking creatures, the Shattered Brethren, former slaves of the Illithids, transformed and deformed by biomancy experiments. Through a telepathic contact, they reveal to us the horrors that inhabit these desolate lands and the tragic past of Bloodspur. Hour of the Raven. To study the history of Bloodspur is to embrace a maddening task, and little to no source of knowledge exists about these desolate lands. Not even an archaeologist could clearly unravel its past through the study of the ruins that can be found on its surface. Such is the desolation caused by its constant electrical storms that have swept the past of the Tani civilization into oblivion. Perhaps the horrible creatures that now inhabit its undergrounds have some record of their past, but such records, in addition to being inaccessible, would be incomprehensible due to the alien nature of their culture. The only reliable sources that can be found about this past may be with the survivors of the ancient Tani civilization, who today take refuge in the city of Fimol in Barovia and try to keep the records of their history and their culture alive. Even this oral tradition, however, has its limits. Perhaps one day, if the 13 tomes of the Tani are brought together once again, the mystery surrounding Bloodspur's past may one day be fully revealed. Until then, however, we must remain with these fragments accounts of these traumatized and deranged minds. In the distant past, the region of Bloodspur was not known by this grotesque name, and was home to diverse forms of life, including different forms of animal and plant life, and different humanoid civilizations. Among the many civilizations that once occupied this region, one would rise to become a vast empire, known as the Tan Empire. Despite its vast territory and power, the origins of this empire take us to a remote community that inhabits the rocky Mount Macab. Legend says that the Tan were a peaceful and reclusive people, and that they sought the isolation of the mountains for their religious meditation practices. Governed by a council of elders, the masters of the Tani were capable of extraordinary feats of the mind, and devoted their time to learning and developing their mental gifts. A rigid hierarchy structure marked masters and apprentices, and children with psionic potential were quickly identified and taken for a long training and improvement of their talents. If the circumstances of fate were different, perhaps these psionic masters would have remained isolated and dedicated to their art and philosophy. However, the arrival of a powerful psionic in their midst would change their destiny forever. Master Dorji quickly rose to power, proving to be one of the most capable psionics known. His extraordinary talents clearly set him apart among his peers, and would soon prove that his ambitions were also limitless. Divergent reports exist about this figure. Some portray him as a savior, someone with great talent who would illuminate the world and guide civilization to a new peaceful era. Others, however, report him as an abusive figure, capable of enslaving others to his mental commands, and who reveled in his power. Whatever the truth about this mysterious leader is, the fact is that the Tani emerged from their mountain settlement to declare themselves the masters of a vast empire. Official records from this time demonstrate how the glorious Master Dorji led civilizations into an enlightened era of progress and peace, putting an end to all types of conflict. Many reports, however, state that his rise to power was unexpected and violent, and that the submission of foreign rulers to his power was no different from the mental enslavement he imposed on those who challenged him. Master Dorji became Tsempo Dorji, the great emperor of the Tani, and his reign was long. The peace achieved under his government, however, came at a high price. Many were hunted down by his inquisitors, and dissident and rebellion from the empire was identified when they were still incipient ideas. As the years passed, Tsempo Dorji became increasingly isolated on his throne and no longer trusted his minions, overcome by madness and paranoia. His brilliant mind continued to dream up new plans, and he developed a powerful machine, a probe that fed on psionic energy and was capable of expanding his gifts and mental powers. This machine allowed him not only to better control his empire, but even to project the powers of his mind beyond the confines of his homeworld, exploring the remote corners of the universe in search of ancient secrets. Perhaps Dorji's quest attracted the attention of the bizarre creatures that would come to conquer his empire, or perhaps this tragedy is unrelated to the emperor's arrogant experiments. The truth is that when the bizarre Nautiloid ships invaded the skies of his empire, the great psionic master was unprepared for this confrontation. The now elderly Tsempo Dorji proved to be a leader incapable of confronting his enemies, and a succession of strategic errors led to the fall of his empire. Soon, the Illithids, ruled by the ancient Elder Brain, would take the region of Bloodspur by force, and its population was turned into slaves of food for these tentacular horrors. Dorji's fate is unknown, but many believe that his brilliant intellect has become nothing more than food for the mind flayers. About the mysterious and secrets of this alien civilization, very little is known, other than that they seemed motivated by a desire for unparalleled conquest and domination, and spread their horrors and nefarious influence throughout the Bloodspur region, transforming its landscape into a rocky wasteland. A few survivors tried to hide from the monsters that settled on Mount Macab to conquer and colonize these lands. For years they lived as refugees, fleeing the terrible fate of those captured by the Illithids, until the land was overcome by a mysterious mist. When this mist finally dissipated, they revealed unknown lands. In the year 581 of the Barovian calendar, a group of 13 survivors emerged from the devastated borders of Bloodspur and sought refuge and shelter in the lands beyond. These 13 survivors first settled in the south of the lands of Barovia, in the village of Imol. Although many sought distance from the tentacular monsters that dominated their homeland, and went to explore other realms of the mists, most of them joined together as a community in this small village. Rumor claims that the heirs of this group have extraordinary powers, and just like in the ancient Tani monasteries, they gather to improve and study the psionic and telepathic arts in secret, gaining power and knowledge to defend themselves against the monstrosities that exiled them. For more than a century, the lands of Bloodspur remained a mystery and a festering wound at the core of the Land of the Mists. Although some of its horrors escaped its borders, many were the explorers or victims who were captured by the tentacular masters of this domain to a terrible fate. The alien nightmare of these lands would be enough to deter anyone from trying to establish contact with the monsters that inhabited them. But that didn't stop the ambitious noblewoman Lisa von Zarovich from trying a bold plan. In 739, the vampire established contact with the Mind Flayers for a bold plan of domination. In an intrigue to seize power in Barovia, she allied herself with the High Master Illithid, and together they create a new and terrible aberrant creature, the Illithid Vampire, who now hunts the desolate reaches of Bloodspur. Whatever the purpose of this bizarre creation, the truth seemed to have been lost in the mists. Lisa von Zarovich returned to Barovia without succeeding in her plans, and shortly after the events of the Grand Conjunction, the lands of Bloodspur were swallowed out of the core, taking with it their secrets and mysteries. Isolated by the mists, Bloodspur has become no less frightening or dangerous, and its tentacular monsters now watch from a distance, seeking new victims for their alien plans and purposes. Our telepathic communication with the bizarre creatures known as the Shattered Brethren is suddenly terminated, and panic seems to spread. The creatures prepare to flee in haste, as if their greatest fears are approaching. We soon realize that the terrible Mind Flayers and their slaves have discovered the location of this refuge for the rebellious Shattered Brethren. Most of them escape through the endless network of tunnels in search of safety, but we do not have the same defenses or mental toughness of these creatures. A psionic blast swept through our minds, leaving us immobilized in pain and suffering. In short time, we become mental slaves to the commands of these monstrosities, and are guided through underground tunnels to a terrible destiny and unknown mysteries. Join us, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications, and let's explore the macabre secrets of Bloodspur together.